let's go ahead and get started. Welcome back for what will be our last session this year. We might have some, the next year if we need to, but this is our last scheduled session. This is just a question and answer session. It's going to be an open forum. You're welcome to ask follow-up questions to any of the questions that your counterparts ask. We did receive many questions ahead of time that I've kind of got on the slides that we're going to go through. And then, but if my answer has follow-up questions, then by all means, don't hesitate to jump in. If somebody on my team can monitor the chat, because I want to, hop sharing a screen in my notes. So, if you have questions to ask, I will say that roughly half of the questions we received ahead of time are not SEC squared related. They're more system related. We're going to hit on the ones that I think we can answer, and then we can maybe have a conversation about some of the other stuff that was asked that we don't really have good answers for. So with that, I'm going to hide myself and we're going to just dive in. So I kind of broke them down into categories. So just general questions. The first one is, what should our expected turnaround time be? And I think that's a fair question. I think it's something that needs to be addressed. By policy, we do have 5 working days to get something processed. That does include MSPB 1 and MSPB 2. And the question it asked, does it reset when things are returned? And in theory, yes, it does reset. But our goal is 3 working days. Over the last 11 months, many of the agencies, especially the really big ones, have implemented across the board increases, some multiple times. And so, right now we'll have anywhere from 2,000 to 3,000 pending actions in the workflow. So, additionally, like it says, there are many actions that come to us for approval that shouldn't come to us for approval that are also bogging down the system. We're going to cover that in a later section about about those specific actions and what maybe some things we can cover, but they are causing tremendous delays and headaches with having to review things that shouldn't be coming to us. Internally, we've been reallocating resources. I know I've had a couple of you reach out to me saying, did I get a new analyst? Well, no, you haven't got a new analyst. But we've had some agencies who have put in several actions, thousands of actions. And so analysts who are not assigned to those agencies are helping those analysts out with that workflow. So we've just been moving resources around to help analysts who are getting a huge chunk of actions put in at once. On January 1st, like it says, we will be reshuffling agencies to try to even out the workload. One of the good things about ECC is I can get pretty good data on how many actions each analyst are processing and reshuffle the agencies to kind of balance that out to hopefully expedite your process. We also have a new analyst starting on January 1st to replace Dewan, who's now at career counseling. Dewan's pulling double duty. So he's trying to help the career counseling people, and he still has agencies. And so I know we've had a couple of analysts jump in to help with his workflow. Be patient with us. Like I said, there's 3 big agencies that all did across the board increases within a month of each other. And so we're talking about roughly 8,000 actions were put in over the course of a month. So just be patient with us. But in theory, in a perfect world, 5 working days for 1 and 2, MSP 1 and 2. But like I said, our goal is 3. And for the most part, on average, we're staying below that 5. But I know that in the past month, 6 to 8 weeks, it's taken longer than probably it should. But that's just a volume thing at this point. So any follow-ups to that? Because I know that's important to y'all. It's important to me. It's important to Kelly. Our turnaround time and providing you that service as quickly as possible is important to all of us here. But I'll be happy to address any concerns you have about it or questions you have about that before I move on, because I know that that's important to everybody on this call. So any follow-up comments or thoughts on that? All right. Salary determination. For jobs that don't require competitive recruitment in NeoGov, for a current employee, if the 15 and 10 isn't equitable with their peers, can we pay them an equitable salary? And that answer, we kind of hit on a couple times in some of these trainings, but according to VCP, exceptions to that salary cap are considered on a case-by-case basis if the agency provides a documented salary inequity. So we're happy to look at those on a case-by-case basis. If the 15 and 10 doesn't get them to where their peers are, we'd ask that in the actions you submit to us, you cite the VCP section that you want to pay them more than this for, and then give us some examples of the people who they were compared with for us to look at from an equity standpoint. We get into, I've gotten a couple of emails in the past couple of days about this as well, outside of just the questions for this. And, we don't know who their peers are. So I would just, if you could help us with that in the process, that would be great. So we're talking about inequity though, not inequality. That's been a big thing for this whole project, is it's not an unequal amount of money. It's an equitable amount of money. If they're a brand new supervisor, this is their first supervisory job, they probably shouldn't make as much as someone who's been a supervisor for 20 years. So equal versus equity, we're happy to look at it. Please put in there, the VCP section, you want us to consider that more than 15%, as well as who the peers you consider are. Questions about that?
Are we supposed to put those peers, list them in the comment section on the transaction, or send a separate email, or?
Either works for me. I mean, so what I'll say is, your analyst email or my email is not the system of record. Employee Central is. And so if you email it to your analyst and they approve it because they see it and then it comes to me, I don't have a copy of that email. And so ideally you would say, these 5 people are their peers in the comments section, just because it stays with the action and I can see it and your analyst can see it at the same place.
Okay. Thank you.
Sure.
You got a question in the chat.
What's this say?
In some instances, their peers are not in the same classification. Does that matter? It's from Quentin.
So does it matter? Probably, but I think that's more of a, do we need to address the peers classification? Because if they're doing the same job and they're all in different job classes, then we probably have a misclassification somewhere. So we might need to address both issues at that same time. Is everybody else hearing feedback? I'm just going to hit mute all. Hang on 1 second. All right. You can unmute yourself to ask questions. I was getting some feedback from somebody. Does that answer your question, Quentin?
Brian,
Yes.
can I expand upon that a little bit?
Sure.
What if they are doing the same job, just in a different area? So the duties may be a little different. Just say we have somebody in compulsory schools that does a particular job, but someone at child nutrition that does the same thing. So technically they're peers, but in different areas. So their workloads or the duties may vary somewhat. Would you want us to include it in that as well, even if they're in different?
So if their workload or so when we mean peers, we don't mean everybody in a, I don't know, education program specialist 1. We mean the peers that they work side by side with.
Okay.
So similar duties, not just the same job class, because y'all can draw a distinction on that and say, yes, we're paying these more, but they're doing this function, which is more valuable and more complex or more, labor intensive, whatever it is. This group of employees does something different and should make a different salary. That we're perfectly fine with that.
Okay.
All right. What happens if the 15% and the 10% doesn't get the employee the new minimum? And that per year appropriation bill, all employees must be paid the minimum salary for their job class. So obviously, if the 15 and 10 doesn't get them to the minimum, we have to move them to the minimum salary of the job classification. That's pretty straightforward, but it was asked, so I wanted to just include it. New hires. How far into the future can we date a NeoGov hire? So from our policy 4.913, new hires from a referred list, the date can be no greater than 15 calendar days past the expiration of the referred list. So it's not really a today's date versus future date. It's if the list expires, 90 days from now, it can't be more than 105 days past the expiration date on the list. Okay, so that really depends on when you're making the hire off the list, but there's no limit on it so long as it's not more than 15 calendar days after the expiration of the referred list. Questions on that? This was an issue, I don't know, 3 or 4 years ago. It really has died down a lot. That's a fairly recent policy revision, like I said, in the last 4 or 5 years, but we had one agency who was future dating hires, 6 months after the list expired. Because they knew they wanted this person, they just didn't know when they were going to start, but the list was going to expire, so they would date it for 6 months from now, then ask us to fix the hire date when it came time to hire them for the actual date. Anything else on this one? Oh, I just saw a chat pop up. We have been asked not to enter them more than 30 days before the start date. Yeah, I don't know about that, but there's no policy that prohibits that. The only policy that prohibits that is future dating it into the new fiscal year. We'd ask you to not in June hire somebody for July 1st until after July 1st. But other than that, that's not a policy. That might be your analyst's preference, but that's not a policy. So. Title changes. Do all title changes in the IT occupational group have to be reviewed by the ITPDC? So currently, staff at personnel board are reviewing level changes at the staff level. We are supposed to only be sending things to the ITPDC if the family is changing. So if you're going from programming to network, we send those to the ITPDC. If you're going from a worker to a supervisor, we send it to, or if it's a pre-SEC title unrelated to a new SEC title. So if it's a programmer going to the programmer family, we're okay with those, kind of like we are with the old accountants, the new accountants, the old admin assistants, the new admin assistants. If it makes sense to us, we're not going to send those to the ITPDC. If it doesn't make sense to us or we have questions about it, then we will send it to the ITPDC. But we're not going to send, if you have a current employee who's a 1 going to a 2, we're not sending those to the ITPDC unless you just want us to. Questions about the ITPDC? Or title changes that for information technology jobs? Right. Organizational chart. This was a very good question. I enjoyed this question. How do we handle current and proposed organizational charts for budgets and other actions? So Employee Central does not have the capability that we've discovered for proposed organizational charts, nor handling personal services budgets within the system. For regular daily title change actions, you can update the supervisor in the organizational unit within the title change. And that's sufficient for us to be able to go look at that new supervisor's organizational chart and see where they're going to fit in. Budgets are a moving target right now. We don't really have a good answer for that, but the system, whatever we get to, will not be done within Employee Central. I'm confident of that. Anything beyond that, we're still trying to figure out what's best for handling personal services budgets. Daniel might can speak a little more on that. He's been working with MRS about budgets, but I don't know if he has anything to add to that, but that's kind of where we are. So for your regular daily transactions, just changing the supervisor at an organizational unit at the same time you're changing the title is sufficient for us to be able to look at the position org chart, look at that new supervisor's organizational chart and see where that position is going to be going. If they're not changing organizational units, then that's irrelevant, but if they are gonna be changing, then it'll show us where they're gonna be. Recruitment. Why should I not post the zone 3 maximum or pay grade maximum as my maximum salary? So posting the zone 3 maximum or your pay grade maximum as your maximum salary is fine. It just, again, we've covered this in a couple of different of these presentations, but please keep in mind that when you hire off that list, we will be looking at equity. So if every current employee is posted for the posted job classification makes below the market, we're not going to let you hire someone at the zone 3 max without a case being made for how it is equitable. So we're not saying if you post the zone 3 max and want to hire at the zone 3 max, that's fine. Just know it's going to have to be equitable with their peers, not equal, equitable. You know, if you post an accountant and this one you're going to pay zone 3 max or even the pay grade maximum because they have a CPA license and none of the others do, that's fine. Just keep in mind that posting a salary that you can't pay is a disservice to you, your lists of applicants, all that kind of stuff. So just keep that in mind as you decide what your agency maximum is for a job posting. For payroll purposes, will pending transactions in the SPB be approved prior to the end of December so that W-2 information will be correct as possible for calendar year 22? We're doing our best. There's still, I think 1,600 last time I looked. We're waiting through them. We're going to do our best to have them cleared by the end of the year, especially for, the big, the ones of you who, 3/4, half of your employees have received it, but then the other ones haven't. So we're working on it, Barbara, and we'll do our best to because that is important to have the W-2s right, to have them paid the right amount for the year. So we're working on it. Any questions on job posting, zone 3 max or pay grade maximum? All right. For selection of exempt positions, why can't I just change the title once I have a candidate? This has come up numerous times from numerous agencies. So it's fairly new, but just from our perspective, it looks bad to post a job, for example, at the first level of a family, and then hire someone at the second or third level, even if it is exempt, and you could have just hired them as a 2 or a 3 to begin with. First, you're eliminating potential candidates who had known, if they had known you were willing to change the title, would have applied but didn't because you posted the first level with the salary range of the first level. Second, I want to remind you that just because you're exempt from our competitive selection doesn't exempt you from all the provisions of a merit-based system. Each agency is responsible for ensuring that its workforce complies with all state and federal laws, guidelines, and court orders regarding equal opportunity employment. So, in theory, yes, you are correct. You can do that, but it's not in any way, shape, or form a good practice to follow. Okay, if you post a job, you should be hiring for that job. I get things happen. You post a 1, you get a really good candidate who qualifies to be a 3. It happens to us. Okay, but if that's the case, you're eliminating. You've non-compellingly put them at a 3 when you only posted for a 1. And like I said, just because you don't have to competitively recruit through us doesn't absolve you of all of the other requirements of a merit-based system. It just means that you are having to do it yourself as opposed to us doing it through NeoGov. So just keep that in mind. I would highly discourage this. I get they're exempt, but just keep all of the other merit things in mind as you make this decision. All right, so now the rest of the questions I received are all questions about Employee Central and or NeoGov. I'm going to do my best to answer them as delicately as I can. I'm happy to entertain follow-up questions, and I'll be happy to tell you I don't know or I can't answer that. But feel free to ask because these things are important. They're questions we have, a lot of them as well, but we don't have necessarily the best answers for some of these questions. So just keep that in mind. All right. I got this from 3 different agencies in some form or fashion. Can we get step-by-step instructions on how to enter detailed budgeted pay or additional comp or anything like that? Can we get step-by-step job aids from either MSPB or MMRS? Like I said, we got 3 different agencies asked the same question in some form. So here is our answer. We can't speak on behalf of MMRS. So the 2 questions that ask an MMRS do this, that's an MMRS question. I know they have some job aids out there. They're available, even if they're not the best or 100% accurate anymore. All right, we've had internal discussions here about creating these documents or if somebody asked about actually having training where we share our screen and walk through the steps of doing this. There are several things that we have had to consider in pursuing this matter. First and foremost, this is not a personnel board system. We don't control it. We're technically the business owner, but we didn't program the system and don't have the expertise. We don't have the knowledge to know how everything works. Second, the processes, as you all are well aware, have changed and are changing regularly. So maintaining job aids on how to key something in when we don't control and don't know if and when they will change would be a challenge for us. And, you know, that's the answer. If there's follow-ups, we'll be happy to see if we can work through some of this stuff, but this is something that we have kicked around over here because we think it would be beneficial, but at the same time, we don't have the expertise to prepare these job aids, nor do we have any control over when they would change and keeping them updated. So that's where we are with this. Are there any questions about that? All right. For transfers outside of NeoGov, do we have to wait until separation to rehire or use the form? All right, so yes, you have to wait for the separation. MMRS has abandoned the transfer form. And it's my understanding they directed you to begin entering them directly into Employee Central as opposed to sending us the form. You will have to wait until the agency the employee's leaving separates them, and you will have to use the rehire code to hire them into your agency. And that's even if they're a contract worker. If they've ever been an employee or contract worker, you will have to use the rehire code as opposed to the new hire or transfer code. That's how the system is set up. All right. So Magic requires race to be entered when MSPB's application and NeoGov do not. Why? All right. So State Personnel Board's application and NeoGov have never required race, but the system of record for employee reporting always has. So through the hire process in SPARS, it was required to be entered. It's the same for Magic. We don't ask for it on the application or NeoGov because it shouldn't matter for in terms of interviewing applicants and reviewing applicants. But when you go to make the hire for that person, SPARS is always required and EC requires that you put the person's race in there. So that's the answer to that. The salary for NeoGov hires do not come into EC. Is there a way to make this work? Unfortunately, no. This will be the case for the foreseeable future. The system does not have the ability to hire from NeoGov with the salary. So 2 transactions will be required for a hire from NeoGov. I'm sorry, it's the system. Original state hire, I love this question. Original state hire dates are reset to randomness on transfers. can we work with our analyst on these dates? And the follow-up was, or do we need to go through MRS? So yes, it will. We have noticed that it will randomly reset hire dates, sometimes to the employee benefit, sometimes to the employee's detriment. And it will mess with their leave accruals as well. So it's much quicker to go through your analyst to obtain the separation date from the previous employer and to correct the hire dates directly through them than going to MMRS. I know some of y'all have started reaching out to MMRS directly, who then they have to email me, and then your analyst emails me, and then you email me, and I've got 4 or 5 emails on the same hire date correction. So if you could just email your analyst directly saying this got changed to the previous hire date, or it didn't bring over the correct hire date, we're happy. We can fix some of the issues, and sometimes we have to get MRS involved, but it will be much quicker on your end to just email your analyst directly and say, so-and-so's hire date's incorrect. We'll figure out what it's supposed to be, and then we will update it or send something to the help desk to update it. So I'm not sure systematically what's going on, but there are numerous instances where the hire date on a transfer or a rehire either reverts back to one when they had a break in service or doesn't carry forward the correct hire date, and they're now earning less leave than they should be earning. So keep that in mind on your transfers. It is fairly common. And so if you see one you need to fix, just email your analyst directly and ask them to fix it.
Ryan, at
Yes.
one point we had talked about the state hire date in EC, that was actually the PIN entry date.
Right. So this is really, it's the field called original state hire date, which is right
Okay.
below state hire date. That's the one, it's my understanding, that goes over to SPARS for leave accrual. And that's the
Okay.
one that's being reset to, like I said, either really, really early if they had a break in service, and then really, really late if they didn't. So, but it's the original hire date. You're right. The state hire date is typically the agency hire date and or position entry date.
Okay.
It's the original hire date that's getting swirly.
Okay. So when it says state hire date in EC, that is not really the state hire date.
No, ma'am.
But the
Yeah,
original state hire date should be their actual state hire.
Correct.
Okay.
And that's the one in SPARS. That's the one traditionally we would call the state hire date.
Yeah.
And that's the one that drives leave accrual.
Okay. Thank you.
Sure.
So Ryan, with that being said, like we have a lot of our people who were promoted, had PN sub-agency switches back in July, August, September,
Yes, ma'am.
that I just asked them for a report on so that I could send this over to MMRS. They're our employees. So does that still need to go to our analysts as well? Or can I just send them what we have in our history of record to show their state hire date on over to MMRS? Do we still need to send everything over to the analysts?
It's going to be quicker to go through because they're going to email us asking for permission anyways.
Okay.
So, I mean, and they'll typically, those of you who have gone through MRS, you know this, but they will email me and copy you on it asking for permission to make the changes that you send them. Either way, it's because you might copy your analyst on the email to MASH, and then your analyst will prepare the document and they'll send it to me, and then you'll send it to me. And then, so it's cleaner just to go through your analyst. The only time I would recommend going to MMRS is if Employee Central is right and SPARS is wrong. Everything else they're going to kick back to us anyways. So we're cutting out a step if you just go straight to your analyst.
Okay, thanks.
Yes, ma'am.
Expect some emails from us.
Well, we get plenty of those. So, you know.
Thank you.
All right. What action require Ryan's approval? We know salary changes and promotions, but why geolocations? So technically, I'm only supposed to see salary changes above the market and position title changes. Unfortunately, as y'all are all well aware, it doesn't work that way. We made them aware of this issue on January 12th, but to date, due to system limitations, there isn't a whole lot they can do about it or we can do about it. I have been told for things that don't require my approval, like geolocation, county codes, warrant sort codes, if you pick a random date that does not correspond to something that did require my approval, it shouldn't route to me. For example, if I had to approve a title change on December 1st, anything else also effective for December 1st will route to me because that original request routed to me. If you were to enter county code change for December 2nd, for example, that didn't really matter what date it changed. I've been told in theory it won't route to me. From experience, that doesn't seem to be the case, but that's what we've been told. So in reality, Ryan only supposed to get position title changes and salaries for new hires, promotions, or in-range adjustments that go beyond the market salary. So, you know, as much as it's a headache for you, I promise you it's infinitely worse for me. All right, I'm doing 200 actions a day, roughly, since go live. I don't like it any more than you. Unfortunately, I don't think there's a whole lot we can do about it right now. Once we get settled with the new employee in place and kind of get our structure set, I'm hoping to give somebody else access to MSBB2 to help me with the actions. But right now, with the volume right now of her MSBB1, it hasn't worked out great. So that's the answer to that question. I know it stinks that you have to wait a second step for a geolocation change. I don't know why, but that it kind of is what it is at this point. So that was all the questions I received. I'm going to now open the floor to things we didn't cover. Let me stop sharing my screen. And cut my camera back on. And now we can open the floor for questions. Questions? Should we still process hires through NeoGov or do a direct hire in EC? You know, that's NeoGov is still the system of record for new hires, especially for jobs that were posted through NeoGov. So like we mentioned, you know, a couple of times in these trainings, we still want you to make a good faith effort to hire them through NeoGov. But don't kill yourself. If it doesn't work, it doesn't work, and then hire directly into EC. That's fine to go that route. Anybody else?
I have a quick question.
Sure.
When we're doing a promotional title change, when we go into it to do it, there's no place for attachments. So we've been sending like the application to our analyst. Do we need to include you on that email as well? Or is there a way we can get add attachment button to that section?
So there's not a way to it. So I'm assuming we're talking about, like, you know, going from your wildlife. So let's just say a you know, environmental natural resources 1 to 2.
Correct.
There's no way, and there never will be a way, because that's on the position, not the person.
Okay.
So attaching an application is not going to be an option there. You don't have to send it to me, because once your analyst approves it, I'm going to assume that they've checked the qualifications and qualified. So
Okay.
I'm not double checking the qualifications on every one of these. Frankly, I don't have the time. So I'm relying on your analyst to get that right on the front end.
Okay, thank you.
Yes, ma'am.
Hey, Lorinda, what I've been doing is I go in on the comment section after I email it and just say email application email to analyst on whatever date. That way it's in the transaction that we all know it's been done.
Okay, that's a good idea. Thanks, Jessica.
Ryan,
Yes.
on, like when we do salary progression and we have somebody that's gone above and beyond, so we're giving them a little extra than what we have somebody that maybe doesn't go above and beyond. And so they're going, getting a higher salary, and it looks like maybe it's not equitable to the analyst because they don't know the difference in their, in their
Performance,
work
sure.
habits, right?
Sure, sure.
I mean, I can't say this other employee stinks. Do I just can say this employee goes above and beyond or whatever,
Yeah, in the comments, it can be something like this person's performance exceeds their peers.
Okay,
That's good enough for us. I mean, it's just a reason why. I certainly wouldn't go into the comments and talk about, the other employees. I would say this person just exceeds the other ones.
okay. Thanks.
Sure,
Just want to be sure that was enough.
sure. Jennifer loves my mug. I'm assuming it's the new mug. That was a birthday present for me from a couple of people on my staff, and I do love my new mug too. Dwight's my favorite character, so. Anybody else? All right, guys. It's 10:41. We're gonna call it. This is recorded, and I know y'all know this, but our YouTube page has every one of the recordings from all of these sessions on it, as well as all of the learning videos, the little 3-minute, quick hits on various topics. New one came out this week from our training director, Michael Finley. It's really good on managing employees who are teleworking. Go check it out. But all of our videos are on our YouTube page. Our communications team and staff have worked hard on preparing those and good little quick hit, 4 or 5-minute videos on various topics. And we've got a bunch more planned in the future. And so we're going to be in touch. Like I said, this is the last one we have scheduled for an overview of the VCP. If there's other things you want to see us cover, please, email me, email communications and let them know. We're always looking for ideas to get y'all better information. So, if you think of something that you want us to cover, either in a full training like this or in like little short videos, then just let us know. With that being said, if I don't talk to you the next week, which I'm sure I'll talk to most of you the next week, but if I don't, have a great Merry Christmas, Happy New Year, and session starts 3 days after New Year. So it's the fun time of the year again, and we'll be in touch with we have, Brittany sends out emails about the trainings and things like that. So just look for those emails, and if you think of anything else you want us to cover, just absolutely. And this whole process was based off of the VCP survey, and so we want to hear from you. If there's things that you need more training on or want more information on, then don't hesitate to ask. And other than that, y'all have a Merry Christmas.
Thanks, Ryan. Merry Christmas.
Thanks, Ryan. Merry Christmas.
Ryan, thanks.